Welcome, Dolphins fans, haters, and everyone in between to your favorite show discussing the greatest franchise in sports, the Miami Dolphins. This is the PhinsPod. My name is Moose, your host, and we got football tonight. The big bad Raven is coming to town, and if we're to go by recent history, this story writes itself. The Dolphins have been absolutely decimated by the Baltimore Ravens now for the better part of a decade. Tonight, the Dolphins not only have that tough task in facing the Ravens, but they're also going to have to overcome themselves in order to make this matchup competitive. So today, we're going to talk about what could happen, what's likely to happen, and what our 2-7 Dolphins, coming off a win, can do to stand a chance and maybe, just maybe, shock the football world. Get comfortable, and let's dive in. So, what does the world think? Well, Vegas has Miami as a 7.5-point underdog, and when you consider that you get spotted 3 points just for being at home, nobody thinks this is going to be a close one. Every NFL Network pundit has already picked Baltimore, and tonight, when they're going to do those game picks, that's almost certainly going to be the case as well. At the time of this recording, we're not yet sure about the status of Tua, and that's frustrating, but if I had to guess, he's not playing. But be sure to check out the last video where we talked a lot more in depth about what could be going on between the Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa. But the analysis for today isn't really going to lean too much on who's playing quarterback for Miami, because to be put simply, that really isn't my biggest concern for this game, and it shouldn't be your biggest concern either. That, my friends, lies in this defense's ability to contain former MVP Lamar Jackson. And not only did he begin that MVP campaign at Hard Rock Stadium back in 2019 by absolutely decimating us, but he's a local from South Florida, so you know he's juiced to get back home and perform in front of those family and friends. Now, if you play this game out in your head, there are way more outcomes that seem to come out negative than positive. Why is that? Why is there utterly no faith in the, obviously there's no faith from the NFL world. That makes sense. But why is there utterly no faith within this fan base? If you go on Twitter, talk to other Dolphins fans, I honestly really haven't felt such despair and hopelessness before. People are handing the Ravens the W without a fight, without even trying to think about, hey, maybe something good can happen. Here at the PhinsPod, we fight though, and we dare to dream. So, what can Miami do to stay in the game and make it competitive, if not pull a win out of their behinds? Simply put, this defense has to put together a performance far more reminiscent of 2020 than what we've seen so far in 2021. The good news on that front is we have seen glimpses of an improved defense over the last couple weeks. First, 2 weeks ago, by containing Josh Allen and the Bills for the better part of a half, and then last week, completely shutting down the Houston offense. Now, to be fair, shutting down Houston is not difficult unless you're the Patriots, I guess, and Buffalo may have shown their true colors last week when they fell to the Jaguars 9-6. But hey, our loss does not look nearly as bad, huh? So perhaps the alleged improvement on defense that I'm saying over the last couple weeks isn't really there. It's more a product of poor offensive performance from our competition recently. Here's the thing, though. I don't entirely buy that. Obviously, the answer's probably in the middle, but yes, the Bills have been sluggish, and Tyrod Taylor has nothing to work with in Houston. But if you look at the structure of our unit, there have been some marked changes, honestly. A couple weeks back, when we did that autopsy on this dead season, one of the biggest mysteries was what happened to Brian Flores and Josh Boyer's defense. They were a mad dog last season, driven, aggressive, honestly setting the tone for many games and many wins. This year, they play passively, plenty of bending and breaking, and that aggressive gene that they had seemingly got edited out of the team. Now, we're seeing a lot more of that amoeba front that we were begging for. Miami's applying pressure early in the drive, and they're forcing opponents into third and longs, helping them get off the field, and honestly, that's what brought them so much success just a season ago. Aggressive defense. And I say it with confidence because we heard this from Miami themselves. Following the Buffalo game a couple weeks ago, Xavier Howard was asked about the improvement in the defense. He literally said that he was happy to see that the defense was getting back to what they did well in 2020. Now, we can argue the deeper meaning of this in the coming months because, to be honest, Why is it only now that you decide to build the defensive identity? What was wrong with playing with some mojo back in week 3? But I digress. We'll get to that. Trust me, in the coming months. Some reasons, though, for the sudden change and improvement in this defense can be noted if you look hard enough. Firstly, in order to run an aggressive front, you need a sound, technically sound back end, fundamentally sound. Don't mess up. Don't blow your coverages because you have way too much going on up front and no help behind you. That's how big plays happen. So the only way Miami was going to be aggressive is if the coaches had confidence in that back end. Last year, they had Bobby McCain. But early on this season, they had a mediocre to bad Jason McCourty, who was honestly running everything as a free safety, combined with a rookie who was learning the NFL game in Javon Holland. The secondary was not nearly as in sync. And for that reason, Miami probably shied away from exposing themselves, and that's why we saw way more zone schemes. Similarly, we saw injuries to Jerome Baker and one of our starting edge players, Jalen Phillips, who ostensibly took over Kyle Van Noy's role. He was also just getting his feet wet. Now, we're over halfway through the season, and perhaps these youngsters picked up the defense, and they're more in tune with their assignments and generally just play more freely. That's probably the case. And that opens up Boyer to be more aggressive, call a more aggressive game, because they have faith that the guys now know what to do and know how to run it. For that reason, coupled with the increased reps that we saw for Phillips and Holland, who in Holland is exclusively now the free safety, I think we see an ascending unit the rest of the way. Too little, too late? Probably yes, but the improvement is important to see, not only for the big picture when we look back at the season, but also for these individual players who are developing and what we want to see from them in the future. Having Jalen Phillips, Nick Needham, Javon Holland, Christian Wilkins, your young core get better, even in a lost season, that's not a total failure because the seeds of this year can blossom in the very near future. So after being optimistic for a little, let's come crashing back down to earth. We got the Ravens and their electric offense. Lamar Jackson can do it all. And like I said, you can only hope to contain him because stopping him isn't an option. So my approach, what I want to see, I want their tight end, Mark Andrews, bracketed. Double cover him, linebacker, safety combo. Because when you consider the value of the tight end position in their offense, it's important to try to take away that short to intermediate outlet valve. Then I want to spy on Lamar Jackson at all times. If I see an organic 3 or 4 man rush without any stunts, creativity, linebacker blitz, we're cooked. Either Jackson will find a running lane if you don't apply extra pressure, or he gets enough time for someone to inevitably break open for a chunk play. Miami has to match Baltimore's aggression and physicality with some of their own. Ideally, the spiral, the person who's going to be sort of following Lamar, make sure he doesn't burn you with a 20-yard run, that's going to be split between a linebacker, Jerome Baker. I don't want Landon Roberts anywhere near the field. Unfortunately, he will be, but I don't want him in the open field one-on-one with Lamar. That'll be embarrassing for everyone involved. But Jerome Baker probably could handle that role a little bit better. And then mix it up with the 2 safeties, with Javon Holland and Brandon Jones. I think Brandon Jones could serve as an excellent spy, considering how fast and athletic he is. Put the game on your high-priced corners. Leave them on an island. Byron X, we're going to need you here. If we lose, it's going to be due to the arm of Lamar Jackson. Make sure of that. And the Ravens receivers toasting you. Don't let them run down your throat. Put the game on your best players on the defensive side. The amoeba front, all day. You want Lamar to have to hold on to the ball, think a little, confuse him. You can't allow him to get into a rhythm and flow passing the ball because then his legs follow, and you haven't even entered that equation yet if he's already dicing you up with his arm. So you have to prevent that by keeping him rattled. Keep that offense disrupted. The good news, Baltimore's traditional running game isn't something special like seasons before with Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins. Now, due to injury, the run game goes through Lamar even more. So not only does Miami have to be aggressive when covering the pass, but they also have to stop the traditional run. Force Baltimore in consistent second and third and longs. That way, Miami forces the Ravens to score on long, systemic drives or by popping big plays. Don't allow them to carve you up like Swiss cheese over the middle time and time again. Baltimore also doesn't start fast, and for some reason, that's the only thing Miami has had consistent success doing. So for us to stand a chance, you got to get an early lead and force the Ravens to become one-dimensional offensively. If Miami's defense is able to do that, then I do believe they can hold Lamar and company to 24 or less. The best shot that we have to be competitive. All right, so we got a rough idea of what Miami's defense needs to do. Make Baltimore predictable and be able to do your job to capitalize on that predictability. But here comes the big issue. Even if what we just talked about comes to fruition, and Miami's defense plays the best game of the season, which is doubtful, but hey, say that happens. It doesn't matter if this offense continues to be as lethargic and generally as pathetic as they have been. If Tua starts, which is unlikely, then I do see a potentially different outcome. But unlike Brissett, Tua can manage that offense and actually, over the course of a game, feel out a defense. He does perform much better in fourth quarters than he does early on. With number one, Tua playing, I do believe that we can execute a few nice drives, not only resulting in much-needed points in this game, but also keeping the Ravens' offense off of the field and giving our defense time to rest. So, what can Miami now do on offense to stand a chance tonight? Throw the ball. I want a game plan similar to what we saw in Tampa Bay. Screw establishing a run game. We know we can't do that. And the Ravens' biggest weakness as a team is that pass defense. Miami must attack that and be successful early on in order to engineer a few drives. Attack deep. Even if you're overthrowing, just push the ball. Get Mike Gesicki involved early and often. Same with Waddle. You want Baltimore's defense guessing, and to do that, you gotta be diverse in your play calls early in the game. And honestly, no defense has really had to guess against Miami so far. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another shuffle on the offensive line, considering that the unit probably played one of their worst games against one of their worst opponents in Houston. Considering the stubbornness, though, that we have already seen with Brian Flores, seeing the same five guys, though, just as likely. Ideally, we're going to start to run the ball consistently in the second half with the game in reach or hell, small lead. Brissett can't turn the ball over. If we have a turnover this week, we're done for. Miami can't get into that kind of game and expect the ball to bounce their way, not against a well-coached, disciplined team like the Ravens. They have to do what they haven't done all year, and that's play a sound football game from start to finish. Here's the small glimmer of hope, the last bit of hope we can hold on to for the season. One thing that is yet to be proven false. Brian Flores' teams play better in the second half of last year. Saw it in 19, saw it in 2020 when things started to click for the team, and we went on a little bit of a streak last year. The second half is always better for Brian Flores-led teams. So essentially what I'm saying to you is that your Miami Dolphins, to win tonight, not only must they do something they have yet to do this year, play well for 60 minutes, but they also need help from Baltimore. Hopefully they aren't playing their best ball, but considering it's prime time, the whole nation will be watching, they can probably get up for this one. The last thing we're going to touch on before getting to some general team news is the X factor. Yep, both Miami and the Ravens play on a short week, 3 less days of prep. And yes, Miami benefits from not having to travel as well, but I don't think that's going to be much of an advantage. But what could serve Miami well is actually something we talked about in the last episode. The Ravens are coming off an emotional win. Not just an emotional win, but a game that went into overtime, all the way to the final 20 seconds of overtime. Baltimore ostensibly played a full extra quarter of football on a short week with little rest, considering they're flying down to Miami as well. So they played that extra quarter, and they won. They pulled out a magical comeback against the Vikings and won. So that extra quarter makes them more tired. And honestly, you could say, well, that sort of comeback against the Vikings could serve as a spark for them to finish the season, a galvanizing moment where they come together and blast off into the playoffs. Or the Ravens could be feeling themselves just a bit. They could be like, damn, we never are out of a game, are we, huh? We got an explosive quarterback and the best kicker in the history of the sport. We're good. We can beat anybody. And shit, look at this. We got the dumpster fire of 2021 next up. The Dolphins should be an easy win. Pray, Dolphins fans, pray that some Ravens players adopt this attitude. Disrespectful and underestimating. Let them doubt us. Let them feel themselves. It really is the only hope we have of sneaking up and giving them a punch in the face that no one, not even most Dolphins fans, would expect. I have way more faith in pulling it off if Tua were to play, but hell, maybe Brissett shines brightest under the glare of the world. We'll find out. It is a national TV game. My score prediction: if Tua plays, I got the Ravens winning 26-20. If Brissett plays, Baltimore wins again 33-13. So I think you can tell how I'm feeling about Tua versus Brissett right now. Let us know your score predictions in the comments below, or if you're from the future and you already know the outcome, feel free to mock me and anyone else who had hope remaining in the comments as well. The last bit of information we're going to cover is some roster updates. Miami continues to shuffle around the back end of their offensive line as they adjust the depth chart just a little bit. Not that it's seeming to help. First, they signed center Evan Boehm to the practice squad. And if that name's familiar, it's because he was actually one of the many young bucks that we brought in to try to help a floundering 2019 squad trying to find an identity. He wasn't entirely atrocious either, from what my memory serves. But similar to this year, that's kind of hard to gauge whether he was atrocious because the caliber of players around him were that bad. At the very least, I think it goes to show you how bad the development of the offensive line has been under Flores when you're bringing back retreads from when you were supposedly stripping the whole team down. Regardless, maybe Boehm can come through, provide some guard help down the stretch, but that will be determined. He equally could have just been signed to become a backup guy, a rotational guy, considering the team placed newcomer Greg Manns on injured reserve. That means Austin Reeder likely going to get the start Thursday night. Frankly, kind of the same as Manns, no difference. And to fill Manns' spot, the team also re-signed veteran center Cameron Tom, who spent all the offseason with the Dolphins, before eventually getting cut in those final cuts back in August. And lastly, the Ravens announced that they're wearing their white uniforms with black pants for Thursday. That means Miami won't be wearing that traditional white garb for their home games, which we see all the time. Since it's a night game, the heat advantage won't be nearly as prevalent. So Miami's going to be wearing a little bit of color. Finally, we get to see a little aqua because all the time we see white on the road and white in most home games. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because I had hoped that Miami might throw out the throwbacks. It's been a long time. Although they did announce, certain games this year, the throwbacks will be had. You always like to see it pop up, but unfortunately the team did announce they're just wearing their normal aqua tops and white pants. But hey, at least we're going to lose in a little bit of style. So, fellow Dolphins fans, or just football fans, what do you think? Based on our conversation, has a little bit of hope been sparked in you, or are you expecting a beatdown from Baltimore like usual? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're still listening, subscribe. Why the hell not? It helps the show out and helps make sure you don't miss any of the PhinsPod.
The thing about this, to me, that's a little bit, it's not a non-story because Tua was drafted high up. There were high hopes. But everyone knows Deshaun Watson's a lot better than Tua.
But it becomes a story, though, Max, because they lied to you and looked you right in your face and said, no, we're not into Deshaun. We don't want Deshaun. Tua's our quarterback moving forward. Even though those words didn't necessarily come out of their mouth, the fact that they kept endorsing Tua as the guy. Huh?
What should they have said?
I would have just simply said, we are always looking for great players to improve our roster. We don't know where that's going to end up at. And, Tua right now is doing the best job he can. He's been in and out of the lineup. We're winning games when he's in. We're losing games when he's in. And, hey, he's young. He's got an opportunity, a chance. And you just dance around that. Rather than to be definitive and say, Tua's our guy. We're wrapping our arms around Tua.
That's going to do it for us here today. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Timothy Ritchie, Brian Guger, Brandon Leist, and Chris, members of the pod and supporters of the show over on Patreon. Check that out. Links in the description, or head to patreon.com/PhinsPod. Thank you all so much for that continued support. And please remember to like the video if you enjoyed the show. Subscribe like we mentioned so you never miss a chance to chat about your Miami Dolphins. If you're listening via audio, remember that the podcast is available on every platform: Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, and of course, visually as well on YouTube. Continue the conversation with us over on Twitter and Instagram @PhinsPod. I hope you all have an amazing day, and until next time, stay safe. Love y'all.